Shan Prabhu. You're a good Madanga player.
I've been doing it a long time. But,
how long?
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
But I don't really know much, but you know, if I'm doing kirtan every day, pick something up.
Yeah, Krishna reveals.
Yeah.
You do kirtan every day.
Definitely.
But you learn some of the beats and stuff, so good. Excellent. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Hari Hari Bol. Gauranga Gauranga Gauranga.
Maybe I can wonder.
Jai Jai. Suparikar Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari. Shishi Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai. Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Jiu Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiu Ki Jai. Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai. Jai Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Vandeham Shri Guru Shijataha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayati Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Chishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Brindai Tulsi Devyai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev Nitya Lila Pravishta. Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. That I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable, beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramahansa Astatara Shata Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarashata Shri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. I'm offering my Dandavat pranams at the lotus feet of all of my Sri Sri Rupa Anuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat pranams to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. Danda, could you bring, there's a green pillow on my bed, I forgot to bring it, it's like a back pillow. Just put it there. Thank you. Okay, on this Ekadasi Titi day, we're continuing on with our transcendental reading of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's explanation, deep, extensive explanation, commentary on the two verses of Sri Upadeshamrita, Atyahara Prayashascha and Utsahan Nishchayat Dariyat. We're at the end. There are 12 items, 6 positive and 6 negative items in Sri Upadeshamrita for development of bhakti. This is a very long, I've mentioned this is a very extensive commentary, especially the last item, because basically Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is showing the sadhuvritti, the behavior of the Paramahansa Mahabhagavad Vaishnavas, and especially Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was presenting himself as such. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving many examples from Chaitanya Charitamrita of Mahaprabhu's instructions, of Mahaprabhu's behavior and dealings and so forth, so that we know what is Sato Vritte, Sadhu Vritti. Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai. So that verse, which are the 6 positive qualities, the 3rd shloka of Upadeshamrita, if you know it, you can say it with me. Utsahan Nishchayad Dhairyat Tat Karma Pravartanat Sangatyaga Sato Vritte Sadbir Bhakti Prasiddhyati. So now we are Sato Vritte, final, but there are still many examples coming. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving. Yesterday we read the verse that he quoted from chapter 22, Madhya Lila, wherein Mahaprabhu was teaching Srila Sanatana Goswami, and he was pointing out the necessity of surrender, Sharanagati, necessity. If anyone does not understand so well the necessity of surrender, they should read Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj's book, the gem that he wrote called Prapanna Jivanamritam. And I'm not saying this, my Srila Prabhupada said this. There's a little story that once in Bombay, Srila Prabhupada was sitting on the rooftop as he did. There are many photos and videos of Prabhupada. He'd come up to the rooftop on one of the buildings on his property that he had purchased to build the ISKCON temple there. And Srila Prabhupada was quizzing the devotees who were sitting in front of him. And he was asking them, can any of you say, what are the 6 limbs of surrender? Sharanagati. So there was one sannyasi, disciple of Srila Prabhupada from New Zealand. At that time he was named Akoyananda Swami. He's the one that told me the story. And he said, at that time when Prabhupada asked, I was eager to raise my hand because I had memorized the 6 limbs of surrender, so I wanted to show that I knew it. So then Srila Prabhupada said, okay, tell. And then he started saying them one by one. But he could only remember 5 of the 6 limbs. And then Srila Prabhupada said, and humility. That was the 6th one. So he was being shown at that moment that he lacked humility. So, but the thing is, Srila Prabhupada, in response, he said, actually, my godbrother, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, has written a book which explains the 6 limbs of Sharanagati in very great detail, deriving various Shastric references from all over the Vedic literatures, compiling it together, 1 chapter for each one of the 6 limbs, and introductory chapters and ending chapters. His book is named Prapanna Jivanamrita, which means the nectar in the lives of the Prapanna. Prapanna means the surrendered souls, those who are surrendered. What is the Jivan Amrita? What is the nectar in their Jivan? Jivan means in their life. So, the nectar of surrender. And then he said, you should read that book of my godbrother. So then Akoyananda Maharaj went on to tell that after that, in those next few years, it was right near the end of Srila Prabhupada's manifest presence, and then a few years after, with whatever was taking place in the institution of ISKCON, Akoyananda Swami found himself in Navadvip Dham at the lotus feet of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. He had arrived from Bombay. And in the course of his meeting him and hearing Hari Katha, then he requested to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, is there any service that I can render for you? And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, yes, actually, I have 1 manuscript, and I need this to be typed out and published. Yes, I can type quite well. So then he was given this manuscript. Then the next day, as he sat down at the typewriter to begin, he put the book on some kind of book stand and looked at it. And the title was Prapanna Jivanamrita.
Wow.
Yes, so he ended up working with a few different devotees with the English translated version of it. And they eventually published and printed in Germany, actually. They did it. Very, very excellent, beautiful quality. Like a pocket-sized book almost, you know. So that Prapanna Jivanamrita is a must for every single devotee. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, you know that most of the books that we have in English from him, they're mainly from his English darshans that he gave, just verbatim, not written. But this book is actually compiled by him and produced and written by him. So our Srila Prabhupada gave the instruction, you should read that. And he said to himself, he told me that when he saw the title, Then he thought, just see how Krishna has arranged that through the energy of my own effort, this book is appearing in front of me, you see, in my service attempt. Right? This book is now appearing. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he is here pointing out the necessity of surrender, the necessity, Sharanagati. So here's the verse that Mahaprabhu spoke. Sharana loya kore Krishne atma samarpana. Krishna tare kore tatkale atma sama. The meaning of this is when a person surrenders at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Sharana loya kore Krishne atma samarpan. When a person surrenders, Sharana loya, at the lotus feet of Krishna, and like Atma Nivedanam, Atma Samarpan. Then, and how is he doing that? He's doing that by taking shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Guru. That's how. That's how Sharanagati begins. Not by direct surrender, by taking shelter of the manifestation of Sri Krishna as Sri Guru. So what happens then? When a person surrenders at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna by taking shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Guru, then what happens? Krishna tare kore tatkale atma sama. Krishna quickly accepts him as one of his own. Atma sama means like his own self. He takes that person like his own self. So this is the power of Sharanagati, of surrender. And he's saying this is very necessary. Next we go on. We talked about this yesterday in the class. Now, the next point, he's making point for point for point all the different things that the Vaishnava needs to do to develop sadhavritti, following in the footsteps of the great Vaishnavas. And for each point that he's making, then he's quoting a verse mostly from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, the next section is titled The Repentant Abandonment of Wickedness. The repentant abandonment of wickedness. Wickedness, yes. So, this is also from Madhya Lila chapter 25, which is the end of the Sanatana Siksha. So, here, Paramartha Vichar Gelo, Kori Matravad, Kaha Mui Pabo, Kaha Krishnara Prasad. So, here this verse is telling that my spiritual discernment means Paramartha Vichar, Vichar, deliberate, to discern, Paramartha, transcendental. And then he said, my faith, my spiritual discernment, my faith in Bhagavan has been destroyed by unnecessary argument. By what? Vad. Kori matra vad. Who's telling this? We're going to look it up and find out. That's the nice thing about this section, that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not telling the reference, he's not explaining the context. He's just quoting the verse that supports what he's talking about. Now, he's saying, my spiritual discernment, my faith in Bhagavan It has been destroyed by unnecessary argument. That means tarka, tarka vitarka. Argument, counter-argument, trying by logic to defeat like this. So then he says, Kaha mui pabo, kaha Krishner prasad. How will I attain Krishna's mercy now? How? How will I attain Krishna's mercy now? So I'm going to look this up. Madhya Lila, chapter 25, verse 43. Madhya Lila, chapter 25. This is actually how all the residents of Varanasi became Vaishnavas. That's the story. When Mahaprabhu went to Varanasi and he delivered Prakashananda Saraswati and all the Mayavadi sannyasis. So chapter 25, verse 43. So this is actually Mahaprabhu. Wow, it's quite a different translation. Paramartha vichar gela kori matravad kahan mukti pabo. Oh, there's a mistake made here. Mui pabo. Kaha mukti pabo kaha krishnara prasad. The atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, they do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. Yeah. So this is in the context where Mahaprabhu is actually speaking. He's teaching these Mayavadi philosophers the proper understanding of Vedanta. So I'm just going to read a few verses in this context. He's quoting various verses to them. How Krishna has an eternal transcendental form, because Mayavadis don't believe that the Supreme Absolute Truth has an eternal transcendental form. Okay? So he was quoting various different verses from various parts of the Vedic literature, one after the other after the other. The Mayavadis, they do not recognize the personal form of the Lord as spiritual and as full of bliss. This is a great sin. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's statements are actually factual. Aha. Yes. Oh, this is getting near to the end. When people came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to discuss the principles of various scriptures, the Lord defeated their false conclusions and he established the predominance of devotional service to the Lord. With logic and argument, he very politely changed their minds. As soon as people received instructions from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they began to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Thus, everyone laughed, chanted, and danced with the Lord. All the Mayavadi sannyasis offered their obeisances unto Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then began to discuss his movement, giving up their studies of Vedanta and Mayavad philosophy. Now, one of the disciples of Prakashananda Saraswati, who was as learned as his guru, he began to speak in that assembly, offering all respects to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There were hundreds of Mayavadi sannyasis there in that assembly. So that disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati, who was also just as learned as him, he said, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the supreme personality of Godhead. Narayan himself, when he explains the Vedanta Sutra, he does so very nicely. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the direct meaning of the Upanishads. And when all learned scholars hear this, their minds and their ears are satisfied. Giving up the direct meaning of the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, Shankaracharya imagines some other interpretation. He's not taking the direct meaning. He's imagining another interpretation. This is the problem. So all the interpretations of Shankaracharya are imaginary. Such imaginary interpretations are verbally accepted by learned scholars, but they do not appeal to the heart. The words of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are firm and convincing, and I accept them as true. In this age of Kali, one cannot be delivered from the material clutches simply by formally accepting the renounced order. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation of the verse beginning Harer Nama, Harer Nama is not only pleasing to the ear, but is strong factual evidence. You know that verse? Everyone together. Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nama Eva Kevalam. Kalo nastyeva, 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 gatir anyata. What's the meaning?
Other than the chanting of the holy names, there is no other way, no other way, no other way to attain perfection. What is it?
Yeah, it says Kaloa in the Kali Yuga. Nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva. Then Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nama. Gatir anyata. Gati means to attain the ultimate goal of life. Gati. So to attain perfection, that is the purpose of the Yuga Dharma. Right? In every Yuga. In Satya Yuga, what is the process given?
Meditation.
Yes, meditation, dhyana. In Treta Yuga, what is the process?
Worship?
No. Yajna. In Dwapara Yuga, what is the Yuga Dharma?
Deity worship.
Yes, Archan. And in the Kali Yuga, Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Eva Kevala is the only way. So this Mayavadi sannyasi, who's now completely converted by Mahaprabhu, he's speaking to the whole assembly and he's giving his firm opinion about what everyone just heard. And, and he's saying that Mahaprabhu's explanation of that verse, Hare Nam, it is not only pleasing to the ear, but it is strong and factual evidence. For the Kali Santarana Upanishad. So here's the translation. No, this is his continuation. In this age of Kali, one cannot attain liberation without taking to the devotional service of the Lord. In this age, even if one chants the holy name of Krishna imperfectly, he still attains liberation very easily. Then he quotes a verse. We'll see where this verse is from. It's quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, which is spoken by Lord Brahma. The 10th canto, 14th chapter is Lord Brahma's prayers to Krishna, called Brahma Stuti, 40 verses. Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Maharaj liked that very much. He would lecture on that every year. So here's the verse, very famous verse. Shreya Shritim Bhakti Mudasyate Vibho Klishyanti Ye Kevala Bodha Labdai Te Shamaso Kleshala Eva Shishyate Nan Yad Yata Stula Tushava Gatinam. So here, Lord Brahma is saying, my dear Lord, devotional service unto you is the only auspicious path. If one gives it up simply for speculative knowledge, or the understanding that these living beings are spirit souls and the material world is false, he undergoes a great deal of trouble. He only gains troublesome and inauspicious activities. His actions are like beating a husk that is already devoid of rice. His labor becomes fruitless. So he quotes that verse. Then he quotes another verse from the 10th canto, 2nd chapter. This is the chapter, the prayers by the personified Vedas when Krishna is in the womb. Yenyera vindaksha vimukta maninas tvayashta bhavada vishuddha buddhaya aruhya krichchena param padam tata patanti adho nadrita yushmad angraya. Very famous verse. Prabhupada quoted this many times. He would say, aruhya krichchena param param tata. That means he falls down. So, O lotus-eyed one, those who think they are liberated in this life, but who are devoid of bhakti to you, of devotional service to you, they are of impure intelligence. That actual is called avishuddha buddhaya. Avishuddha buddhaya means impure intelligence. Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. So they are of impure intelligence, and although they accept severe austerities and penances, and they rise to the spiritual position, to the impersonal Brahman realization, they fall down again because they neglect to worship your lotus feet. It's very interesting how this Mayavadi sannyasi is quoting these verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. How this is exactly pertaining to their situation, both of these verses. They're not taking to the path of bhakti. Anyone who does not take to the path of bhakti and worship your lotus feet, my Lord, simply troublesome, like beating the empty husks of rice. And those who think that they've become liberated, but in actuality, they have not taken shelter of your lotus feet. Yushmad Angraya. Yushmad Angraya means your lotus feet. So they have not taken shelter of your lotus feet. Then what happens to them? Even though they've done severe austerities, penances, and they rise up to a spiritual position, to the Brahma Jyoti, to the impersonal Brahman realization. They do that, they rise up. But then what happens? They fall down again. This is the evidence from Srimad Bhagavatam. They are imagining that they have become liberated, but in actuality they have not. They will again fall down, and what is the main cause of their fall down? They neglect to worship your lotus feet. This is the problem of all the impersonalists, and especially Mayavadis. So, those two verses are quoted by him. Then he says, the word Brahman, this word Brahman, what is the meaning of it? It actually means the greatest, Brahman, the original source of everything that exists, the supreme, Brahman. But the word Brahman, he's saying, indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full in all six opulences. We had a class one day where we discussed extensively the name Bhagavan. And what does Bhagavan mean, KK?
Because they serve all six opulences in full.
Yes, that's Bhagavan. So this Mayavadi is saying, this word Brahman, which they're constantly talking about, and Mukti and Brahman and all of this. But now he's enlightened by Mahaprabhu and he's saying, actually it indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, who is full in all six opulences. But if we take the one-sided impersonalist view, then his fullness is diminished. You know the verse? Om Puranam Adaha Puranamidam Puranat Puranam Udachyate Puranasya Puranam Adaya Puranam Eva Vashishyate. Sri Upanishad, invocation verse. Who is Puranam? The Absolute Truth is complete. Purnam, complete. The word Purnam means complete. And here it's saying Purnam, 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 all throughout this verse. Om Purnam Adaha Puranam Midam. This complete material manifestation has come from the Supreme Complete. Puranam Adaha Puranamidam. Puranat Puranam Udachyate. Whatever emanates from the Absolute Truth, who is complete, whatever emanates from the complete whole, is complete in itself. Purnasya Purnam Adaya Puranam Eva Avashishyate. Even with complete wholes emanating from the complete, he remains always complete. He remains always complete, fully complete, even with universes and creation and everything emanating from that complete whole. It doesn't matter. He remains complete, Purnam. Purnam Eva Avashishyate. So here he's saying that if we take this word Brahman to indicate the impersonalist, one-sided impersonalist view, then what happens? His fullness is diminished. Now he goes on and he says the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Puranas, they all describe the activities of the spiritual potency of the Lord. If one cannot accept the personal activities of the Lord, then he jokes foolishly and he gives an impersonal description. If he cannot describe the activities of the spiritual potency of the Lord, which are described in all the Vedas, Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, then that person, he cannot accept the personal activities of the Lord, so he is a foolish joker, and he gives an impersonal description. The Mayavadis do not recognize the personal form of the Lord as spiritual and full of bliss. This is a great sin. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's statements are actually factual. Then he quotes this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 9th chapter, 3rd verse. This is also spoken by Lord Brahma in the 3rd canto, who perfectly realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead after meditating upon the Lord within the water of the Garbhodak ocean. And Brahma realized that the form of the Lord is completely spiritual. This is certainly a better understanding of the Absolute Truth than the impersonal understanding. So what did Lord Brahma say? Lord Brahma said, Natak param parama yad bhavata swarupam Ananda matram avikalpa avidya chart varcha Pashyami vishva srijam ekam vishvam atman bhutendriyatmakam adasta upasritosmi. He's praying to the Supreme Lord, Lord Brahma. He's saying, O Supreme One, the transcendental form I am now seeing is full of transcendental bliss. It is not contaminated by the external energy. It is full of effulgence. O my Lord, there is no better understanding of you than this. You are the Supreme Soul and the creator of this material world, but you are not connected with this material world. You are completely different from created forms and variety. I sincerely take shelter of that form of yours, which I am now seeing. This form is the original source of all living beings and their senses. So, yes, and then he quotes like another few verses. This next verse that he's quoting is spoken by Uddhava when he came to pacify all the inhabitants of Vrindavan during Krishna's absence. 10th canto, 46th chapter. And he says, Drishtam Shrutam Bhuta Bhavad Bhavishyat Shtanush Charishnur Mahad Alpakam Va Vinachutad Vastu Taram Navachyam Saeva Sarvam Paramatma Bhutaha. Here Uddhava is telling to the residents of Vrindavan, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of all causes. He is past, present, and future. And he is the movable and the immovable. He is the greatest and the smallest. And he is visible and directly experienced. He is celebrated in the Vedic literature. Everything is Krishna, and without him there is no existence. He is the root of all understanding, and he is that which is understood by all words. I think this was where he's speaking with Nanda Maharaj. But we'd have to look up that reference then to find that. So, here this Mayavadi sannyasi continues. Yes. And he quotes one more verse here. Chapter 3, Canto 3, Chapter 9, verse 4. Tava idam bhuvana mangala mangalaya dhyanes mano darashitam ta upasakanam tasmai namo bhagavate nuvidhema tubhyam yo nadrito naraka bhagbir asat prasangai. O most auspicious one, for our benefit, you enable our worship of you by manifesting your transcendental form, which you show to us in our meditation. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Person, and we worship you, whom impersonalists do not accept due to their poor fund of knowledge, and thus they are liable to descend into a hellish condition. And then finally he's quoting Krishna's own words from Bhagavad Gita. This is the famous verse that everyone should memorize. If you memorize 50 verses, this should be one of them. Avajananti ma mudha Manushim tanum ashrita param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. This is from 9th chapter. And here Krishna is saying, avajananti mam mudha. Mudha means rascal. Here it's said directly in Prabhupada's own book, rascals. Avajananti means these persons decry me. Today I was listening to Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita lecture, and he mentioned, he's talking about how Krishna was urging Arjuna that he must fight, right? And Arjuna is complaining, how can I kill my gurus, my respected gurus? And then Prabhupada is explaining how these personalities were so dear. They had so much love and affection, like Drona and Bhishma, who were the teachers, the gurus, the grandfather, so highly respectable. But Arjuna is saying, how can I kill my gurus? And then Prabhupada is talking about the principle of doing what Krishna tells. Because Krishna desired that Arjuna should kill them to establish the spiritual kingdom, the dharmic kingdom of the Pandavas. And Prabhupada is explaining that they had deviated. They had joined the opposition party of Duryodhana, who was demonic, right? So Kshatriyas, this is their principle. If you're on the opposing side, even if you're a relative, even if you're a guru, you must be killed. So Prabhupada was talking about, in that verse, how Arjuna mentioned Krishna's name as Madhusudan and also as Ari Sudan. Ari means enemy. Sudan means killer. So then Prabhupada was explaining how Krishna, he comes to the material world to deliver his devotees and to kill the demoniac. Right? You know that verse? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatuskritam. And he's talking about how Krishna is very famous for killing many, many demons. And his name is Ari Sudana, killers of the enemy, and like that. And then Prabhupada is saying, even if you're God, you will have enemies. It is not possible in this material world to not have enemies. Prabhupada began to talk about that topic. And even if you're God, then he began to describe how there are so many atheists, and they oppose the Supreme Lord. They oppose him, right? And he began to talk about Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj, and Prabhupada goes into so many different topics. It's so interesting to listen to his simple Bhagavad Gita lectures where he covers a whole gamut of different topics within a half an hour or 40 minutes. You know, it's amazing, Srila Prabhupada. According to the audience, he's speaking a particular verse from Bhagavad Gita, and he explains so many different aspects of it, you see. So now this makes me think of what I just heard Prabhupada say today, that even if you're God, he has so many enemies. You cannot avoid having enemies in the material world. So here Krishna is actually pointing out what is the nature of these foolish persons. Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanum ashrita. Krishna is saying that these fools, they disrespect me because I appear like a human being. When I appear in this world, they're not my devotees, and they deride me, these fools and rascals. And that's even Duryodhana did that to Krishna. You see? So they mistakenly misunderstand that he's like a human being, a Kshatriya in a royal society. He's a king, right? No, he's Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is telling here, Avajananti, they decry me when I descend as if in human form. But they don't know. Param bhavam ajananto. Ajananto means without knowing my param bhavam. Param bhavam means my supreme position. Param bhavam ajananto. They don't know. And they don't know that mama bhuta maha ishwaram. They don't know my exalted position as the Supreme Person and the creator of the material world. Mama Bhuta Maheshwaram. So the Mayavadi sannyasi is giving so many relevant verses proving how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, how he has a transcendental form, how those who don't worship his transcendental form will fall down, etc. And then after that, he quotes another verse from the Divine and Demoniac Natures chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita. And this is like toward the end. Krishna is saying this to Arjuna. He says, Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kshipam yajashram ashubhan asurish eva yonishu. Here he's saying, all of these demoniac persons, this is getting towards the very end, after Krishna has explained the nature, the demoniac nature, and he says, Tan aham dvishata kruran. These persons who have dvesha, envy against me, and envy against all living entities. And they're kruran, they're very cruel, they want to do harm. They're always wanting to do harm. So then Krishna says, Kshipami, I throw them, I hurl them, Naradhaman, who are the lowest amongst the men, Ajashram, again and again, Ashubhan, because they engaged in so many Ashubha, not Shubha. Shubha means auspicious, but Ashubhan, engaged in inauspicious acts. He says, I throw them into the lowest condition, Asurir Eva Yonishu, and they take birth in demoniac species of life. So why is the Mayavadi sannyasi quoting that? Don't be opposed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This will happen to you. So then, he goes and he explains, not accepting the transformation of energy, you know what that means? That means Shakti Parinam. Shakti Parinam. Shankaracharya, we know that he's actually Lord Shiva, but he's performing a certain task. So he's saying that he's not accepting the philosophy of Shakti Parinam Vad. That means the transformation of energy. The Mayavadis don't accept this, that there is such a thing as Shakti, and that the Shakti transforms in various ways. You know that? They don't accept. Why? You don't believe that there's anything separate from Brahman, and Brahman is everything. And that's why they think that Brahman is Nih Shakti, does not possess any Shakti. Shakti does not exist. This is their actual Vad, their philosophy that Shankaracharya preached. He did not accept that there's transformation of energy. So what does that mean? Then that means that everything is Brahma. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. And that's where they come to the point of saying, well, actually, everything is Brahma, and Brahma is the supreme, and so therefore, you are Brahma, and you are the supreme. So, not accepting the transformation of energy, Sripad Sankaracharya has tried to establish the theory of illusion. What is that called? Illusion. Maya? Yes. The theory of that Brahma comes under illusion. Right? So he's tried to establish that theory, and he gave the plea that Vyasadeva has made a mistake. Vyasadeva has made a mistake. Sripad Shankaracharya has given his interpretation and imaginary meaning. It does not actually appeal to the mind of any sane man. He has done this to convince the atheists and bring them under his control. Right? That's what Lord Narayan told to Lord Shiva. You will have to go and preach this covered Buddhism and delude all the atheists. And in the Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in one of those early chapters, he's talking about the great contribution that Shankaracharya has actually done. Do you know what is that great contribution? Although he's misled the atheistic persons and so forth, but he has made a very great contribution to the establishment of the Vaishnava Sanatana Dharma in this world.
I think I remember reading that he like paved the way for the four Vaishnava Sampradaya-acharyas to really...
But how did he do that? How did he specifically pave the way?
I don't even remember. I remember hearing one specific aspect. It might have been from Srila Gurudev Maharaj, but he was saying that at that time, people were worshipping the deities just to like always ask for things, like material things, and he diverted them away from worshipping the deity altogether. Something like that. I can't remember that.
Yeah, that may be a certain aspect, but the actual point that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur made is that there is this class of persons who are atheists, okay? And they make a lot of trouble all the time. Atheistic persons are always making trouble in this world, okay? So those atheistic persons, if they would come into the Vaishnava line, they would pollute it completely. They would contaminate the Vaishnava line. So his great feat that he accomplished, Shankaracharya, Lord Shiva, was to separate them out, delude them away, so that they would not bother and cause difficulty for the Vaishnava Sampradayas. By infiltration, you know what I mean? See, that's the thing. Yes, so Sripad Shankaracharya has given his interpretation and imaginary meaning. Is not actually true. It's actually imaginary. Because you know what the philosophy is? In a very simple way, in a very basic, simple way. Mayavadism believes that God is covered by illusion. You just break it down to a few words. God, the supreme absolute truth, Brahma, becomes covered by illusion. Does that make sense? Here it says, it does not actually appeal to the mind of any sane man. Yeah. And you know that Sri Madhvacharya and Ramanujacharya, but Madhvacharya wrote an entire book called The 100 Faults of Mayavad Philosophy. in terms of logic and everything. Yeah.
Where do they think illusion comes from?
This is the point. See, this is the point that any person with some clear intelligence would ask this question. If Brahma is everything, nothing ever existed before or during or after, Brahma is eternally everything. There is nothing but Brahma. Well, then where did illusion come from? This is the actual defeat of that point to a Mayavadi. That if you believe that Maya, illusion, has covered Brahma, the absolute truth, then please explain to us, where did the Maya come from? Because you're saying that Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, everything is Brahma. Sarvam, everything that exists is Brahma. But you're saying that there's this thing called illusion, Maya, that covers Brahma. Where does that come from? You see? So there's many imaginary interpretations that are given. That's why he's saying that here. And they come up with different theories that, oh, there's Brahma in the mode of goodness, Brahma in the mode of passion, Brahma in the mode of ignorance, like this. But that's all nonsense, because it completely contradicts their very own philosophy. Okay? So, but Shankaracharya has done this to convince the atheists and to bring them under his control, and then to separate them out. So the atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, they do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheist philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. So the conclusion is that the import of the Vedanta Sutra is covered by the imaginary explanation of Shankaracharya. And whatever Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said is perfectly true. Whatever meaning that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives is perfect. Any other interpretation is only a distortion. So after saying this, the disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati began to chant the holy name of Krishna. And hearing this, Prakashananda Saraswati made the following statement. He said, Prakashananda Saraswati said, Shankaracharya was very eager to establish the philosophy of monism. Therefore, he explained the Vedanta Sutra or the Vedanta philosophy in a different way to support monistic philosophy. If one accepts the personality of Godhead, the philosophy that maintains that God and the living entity are one, it cannot be established. How can you say there's a supreme personality of Godhead, and if one accepts the existence of that supreme being personality of Godhead, then to try to maintain, put forward a philosophy that God and the living entity are one, it can never be established. How can they be one? But yet, we hear that all the time, don't we? All throughout the world. So, therefore, Shankaracharya, he argued against and refuted all kinds of actual revealed scriptures. And anyone who wants to establish his own opinion or philosophy, then certainly that he cannot explain any scripture according to the principle of direct interpretation. This is the whole point. Direct interpretation. Because they have this motivation. They have this ulterior motive that they want to establish their own opinion, their own philosophy. So they will not be able to explain any scripture according to the direct interpretation of it. They have to make up, they have to, they have to concoct some other meaning. That's what Muni is. A Muni is a person who agitates his mind to come up with a new understanding of something. So then Prakashananda Saraswati goes on. He's again, he's talking to the assembly. And he's saying, the Mimamsaka philosophers conclude that if there is a God, he is subject to our fruitive activities. What does that mean? If God is there, well, he's subject to our own actions that we perform in this world. So that's the karma mimamsaka philosophers actually believe that karma is supreme. And if there's a God, well, he's also subject to the law of karma. So similarly, the Sankhya philosophers, these are all the 6 different philosophical lines in Indian philosophy, okay? Mimamsaka, now the Sankhya philosophers. Similarly, the Sankhya philosophers who analyze the cosmic manifestation, that's what Sankhya philosophy is, understanding the 24 elements, and it's analytical, okay? So they analyze the cosmic manifestation, and they say that the cause of the cosmos is material nature. This is atheistic Sankhya. What? That means it's the same theory that the scientists propound, right? That the cause of everything is matter, right? Then the followers of Nyaya, the philosophy of logic, they maintain that the atom is the cause of the cosmic manifestation, and the Mayavadi philosophers maintain that the impersonal Brahman effulgence is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Then the Patanjala philosophers, who follow Patanjali, they say that when one is self-realized, he understands the Lord. And similarly, according to the Vedas and the Vedic principles, the original cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After studying the 6 philosophical theses, Vyasadeva completely summarized them all in the aphorisms of Vedanta philosophy. And according to Vedanta philosophy, the absolute truth is a person. When the word nirgun, without qualities, when that is used, it is to be understood that the Lord has attributes that are totally spiritual. And of the philosophers mentioned, none really cares for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. They are always busy refuting the philosophical theories of others and establishing their own. By studying the 6 philosophical theories, one cannot reach the absolute truth. It is therefore our duty to follow the path of the Mahajans, the authorities. Whatever they say should be accepted as the supreme truth. Dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. This is an actual quote from Mahabharata. Tarko apratishta shutayo vibinna. Nasa vrishir yasya matam nabinnam. Dharmasya tatvam nihitam guhayam. Mahajano yena gata sapanta. I'll tell you the reference. Yudhishthira Maharaj spoke this. He spoke it in Kamyavan in Braj. We go to that place during our parikrama. It's called Yudhishthira Kunda, right? And who did he speak it to? He spoke it to the...
Yamaraj? No.
Well, it was Yamaraj was there in the form of a hiran, a long-beaked bird with the long legs, right? And this was in the incident where all the Pandavas were very, very thirsty and they were wandering, right? And then they saw birds that were landing in the distance, so they figured there must be a pond of water there. So Yudhishthira sent one of the brothers, I think he sent Bhima first, right? And then as Bhima was about to take water, then he heard this voice, "Don't drink that water." first you have to answer my questions. And then he looked and he saw this heron, this bird, and he just neglected him, drank the water, and he fainted there, like dead. So he didn't return. So then Yudhishthira sent Arjuna. Same thing happened with Arjuna. Then Arjuna didn't return, and then he sent Nakula and Sahadev, and they also didn't return. So now Yudhishthira went there, and Yudhishthira is the most wise, intelligent personality. He's an incarnation of Yamaraj, actually. He's fathered by Yamaraj, right? That's why he's called Dharmaraj. So Yudhishthira saw his brothers, and then he saw this bird. It was actually a yaksha who was like a yaksha is this strange creatures. In Srimad Bhagavatam you can find out about them. They're like ghostly creatures, right? They have mystic powers. So he heard from the yaksha, you have to first answer my questions, and if you answer my questions correctly and successfully, then I'll allow you to choose one of your brothers who can be brought back to life. Only one. So anyway, that whole conversation is very, very interesting. You can see it in the Mahabharata in full, but usually in our Parikrama book, there's just a few different questions that are asked, and almost like riddles. And Yudhishthira Maharaj has to answer them perfectly. So his intelligence was so deep. So there's one group of questions. He put them forward in small little groups of like 3-4 different questions. And this group of questions is the most famous one. First question is, who is happy? That's the first question. Second question, what is the news? Third question, what is the path? What is the path? And the fourth question, what is the most amazing thing? Right? So, what is the news? Actually, that was the first question. What is the news? So Yudhishthira had to think. News? What's the context? But he had to perfectly answer that question. So then he told what the news is. Do you know the answer? The news is that the whole universe is like a big cooking pot, like a wok. And all the living entities in the universe are being stir-fried in this wok. And the fire is their karmic activities, right? That is heating the wok. And the ladle, the handle, is time. That's the news. That's the answer. The Yaksha said, yes, you are correct. So whenever anyone asks you, what's the news? What's the news? What's going on? What's the news? We are being fried. Okay, so then the second question, what is the news? And then who is happy? Who is happy? Now this is an absolute consideration. Who is happy? Then Yudhishthira said, the person who lives near where they work, does not have to travel, right? There's like 3 or 4 criteria. Second criterion, who is not in debt. Third, who very easily can get fresh green leafy vegetables and so forth, right? Very easily. Yeah, and I think that was it. That was it. Which is completely the opposite of what we're finding nowadays, right? Yeah. So you should just know that you're never, ever going to become happy because you're always in debt and you always have to travel here and there and all of these factors. See? So now comes the third question. What is the path? Yes, and this verse is the verse that I just read. Tarko pratishta shutayo vibinna. Nasa vrishir yasya matam nabinnam. Yudhishthira answered, Tarka means dry arguments, okay? And apratishta is not fixed. Huh? And he talks about the word rishi here, that no one can be a great sage. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. In other words, they're always doing tarka and vitarka, right? Trying to establish their opinion, trying to defeat the other person's opinion, like that. So he says, this can never come, these dry arguments are inconclusive. So Yudhishthira is answering the question, what is the path? So then he says, simply by studying the Vedas, which are so variegated, one cannot come to the right path, by which dharma, religious principles, are understood. So then he says, dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. Here he's saying the truth of dharma, dharmasya tattva, nihitam guhayam. Where is that tattva, that dharma tattva? Where can one find it out? He says, because it's very guhayam. It's very deeply hidden, that dharmasya tattva. But it is there in the heart of the realized persons. Then he says, Mahajana yena gata sapanta. Sapanta means this is the pure, unadulterated path. Dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena gata sapanta. So he's basically, he said, the path is what the Mahajans have concluded to be the path. What they are telling, that is the path. And everything else is inconclusive. So to end the class, now we'll answer the last question.
Yeah.
What is the most amazing thing? That's a pretty tricky question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the most amazing thing? So, what did Yudhishthira Maharaj answer? Ahani ahani bhutani gantastiha yamalayam sheshas stavaram ichanti kim ashcharyam atatparam. I memorized this one time because I like this particular answer. So the answer is this. What's the most amazing thing? That day after day, all living entities are going towards death. Gantastiha yamalayam. We see it. Day after day, we see that all living entities are going towards death. But those who have not yet gone, they're called sheshas. That means who are left over. Sheshas stavram ichanti. Those persons who have seen everyone going towards death, and they also understand that they will go towards death, yet stavaram ichanti. It means they want to, they have the desire to remain here. Right? Stavaram, like Stavaram and Jangama. There are two types of living entities. Those who can move and those who are immovable, like trees. So Stavaram means to be established, to be situated. They want to remain. They see, no one has remained. Everybody is going towards death, but yet they desire So then he says, Kim Ascharyam Atak Param. What could be a more amazing thing than this? Huh? So, in this way, this is so interesting when we actually go to the reference of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's verses. It becomes a whole nother class and a whole nother topic, and that's why we're going little by little through all of these. And so then finally, this Prakashananda Saraswati, he stated there, the words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are a shower of nectar. Whatever he concludes to be the ultimate truth is indeed the summum bonum of all spiritual knowledge. And after hearing all these statements, the Maharashtrian Brahmana who asked Mahaprabhu to come and deliver all the sannyasis who's staying at his house, he very jubilantly went to inform Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what they had just told. And when the Maharashtrian Brahmana went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord was going to the temple of Bindu Madhava. This is in Varanasi, after bathing in the waters of the Panchanada. And while the Lord was on his way, the Maharashtrian Brahmin informed him about the incident that just took place in the camp of Prakashananda Saraswati. This is them discussing amongst themselves after they heard from Mahaprabhu, right? So hearing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled happily. And upon reaching the temple of Bindu Madhava, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing the beauty of Lord Bindu Madhava, became overwhelmed in ecstatic love. He then began to dance in the courtyard of the temple. There were 4 people accompanying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu: Chandrasekhar, Paramananda Puri, Tapan Mishra, and Sanatan Goswami. They were all chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the following way. They chanted, Harai Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan. And in all directions, hundreds of thousands of people began to chant, Hari Hari. Thus there arose a tumultuous and auspicious sound filling the entire universe. And when Prakashananda Saraswati, who was staying nearby, heard the tumultuous chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he and his disciples immediately came to see the Lord. When Prakashananda Saraswati saw the Lord, he and his disciples also joined the chanting with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prakashananda Saraswati was charmed by the Lord's dancing and ecstatic love, and by the transcendental beauty of his body. Ecstatic spiritual transformations began to take place in the Lord's body. His body trembled, his voice faltered, he perspired, turned pale, and wept a constant flow of tears, which wet all the people standing there. The eruptions on the Lord's body appeared like kadamba flowers. All the people were astonished to see the Lord's jubilation and his humility, and to hear him talk in ecstasy. Indeed, all the residents of Kashi saw the bodily transformations and were astonished. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu regained his external consciousness, he saw that many Mayavadi sannyasis and other people were gathered there. He therefore suspended his dancing for the time being. And after stopping the kirtan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is a great example of humility, offered prayers unto the feet of Prakashananda Saraswati. And at this, Prakashananda Saraswati immediately came forward and clasped the Lord's lotus feet. When Prakashananda Saraswati caught hold of the Lord's lotus feet, the Lord said, My dear sir, you are the spiritual master of the whole world. Therefore, you are most worshipable. As far as I am concerned, I am not even the level of the disciple of your disciple. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, You are a great spiritually advanced personality, and therefore you cannot worship a person like me. I am far inferior. If you do so, my spiritual power will be diminished, for you are as good as the impersonal Brahman. Oh, my dear sir, for you, everyone is on the level of the impersonal Brahman. For the enlightenment of people in general, you should not behave in that way. Then Prakashananda Saraswati replied, Formerly, I committed many offenses against you by blaspheming you, but now the effects of my offenses are counteracted by my touching your lotus feet. And if a person considered liberated in this life commits offenses against the reservoir of inconceivable potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he will again fall down and desire the material atmosphere for material enjoyment. So, in this way, there's more, but I really stretched it out. But, I mean, it's good, because we're hearing this, right? It's really important to hear all these, huh? And it's Ekadashi, yes. And then, they had like a little discussion between themselves, and Prakashananda was telling Mahaprabhu, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, but nonetheless you are considering yourself his eternal servant. So this went on and on. Yes. And then he said, henceforward, I shall certainly develop devotional service unto your lotus feet. For this reason I have come to you, and I have fallen down at your lotus feet. And after saying this, Prakashananda sat down with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and began to question the Lord as follows. And then they went on and on. Gaur Premanandi, Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Charitamritam ki jai, Shri Upadeshamritam ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami Pada ki jai, Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari.